Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode we're talking about the Minnesota Vikings 2024 NFL Draft Class based on data. So we're going to take a look at production, athleticism, and other statistical factors to determine how well the Minnesota Vikings did in this particular draft class. Stay tuned until the end of the video where I reveal the overall grade I would give the Vikings based on their selections based on data. And if you want to learn more about my grading system, how I come up with all the numbers and everything else like that, go to my top 50 prospects video that's on this channel. Check out any of the other draft review videos. Because one of the main comments I've gotten a lot from people is stop explaining how you do your numbers. And I think the comments coming up will probably be, how do you get your numbers? But either way, check out any of my other draft review videos, and most of them will have a general discussion in terms of how I come up with the numbers that I do, and all that kind of stuff. So be sure to check that out as well. Also check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/jcoburn. There's a glossary of terms on there. You don't have to be a paid member to look at the glossary, but I would, it'd be better if you did become a paid member because I do have a lot of great data stuff on there. But with all that stuff out of the way, let's get to the needs. So this is the general needs perspective for the Minnesota Vikings. Based on all the prospects that they have on their team right now, this is the average AV or positional AV of the prospects that they have. AV meaning approximate value. So this is how well they've been performing in the NFL up to this point on a per year basis. And based on this information right here, we can take a look at the data ranks. So this is the biggest needs on this roster from a data perspective. Quarterback, definitely big need. Running back position, definitely a big need. Yes, they did add Aaron Jones, and I'm the biggest fan of Aaron Jones out there, but he is older, so you do need to consider getting some running backs in here to add some depth to the depth chart other than just Aaron Jones because he is older and he is coming off an injury. So there's a lot of stuff like that that needs to be addressed from that perspective. Also, tight end is another area that could use some improvement. Wide receiver, offensive line, a little bit less so. When you go to the defensive side of the football, edge, big need. Defensive tackle, big need. Cornerback, definitely. Safety and linebacker, a little less so. The defensive side of the football for the Minnesota Vikings has the largest needs compared to the offensive side of the football. But that's kind of how their needs are from that. Lastly, in terms of the biggest factors in terms of my final grade, there's three main things that I do in terms of my grading system. Did they meet their roster needs? It's a big thing. Biggest needs I can identify are running back, edge, quarterback, defensive tackle, tight end, cornerback, safety. Also, did they draft good prospects? Did they draft prospects that can outperform their draft status? These are all the questions that data can give some answers to, and we'll start to answer those questions now. Starting with pick number 10, they selected J.J. McCarthy, quarterback out of Michigan. His data grade was 97.31 out of 100. His floor is 95.27. His balance grade is 96. And his pick AV is 94.98. So what these numbers mean is the data grade is the average AV of a quarterback prospect who tested similar to him based on all of his production traits, athleticism, physical metrics, all those different kinds of things. The floor grade is the average floor or average AV for a prospect who tested like J.J. McCarthy in the pick range where he was selected at in terms of like the top 10 to 5 to 15 kind of range. And then the balance grade marries the ceiling and the floor, and then the pick AV is the average AV for a prospect picked at 10. So all this math is there, but the biggest things you really should pay attention to is the data grade, which is the overall ceiling average. So like the average upside for a prospect based on their data. And then the overall pick AV is what's expected from a prospect taken there. So in other words, if the data grade or ceiling is lower than the pick AV, it probably wasn't that great of a selection because that means that this is a player that doesn't have that much upside, and most players taken there typically have better expectations, if you will. So anyways, so that is J.J. McCarthy's data. In terms of his mobile quarterback score, which is another thing which you can kind of learn about here on this particular slide, he has good mobile quarterback ability. He's not elite. He was like 69 percentile, but he's mobile enough. But the biggest selling point to him was his quarterback efficiency scores. Looking at the BQS and CQS, BQS is his best quarterback efficiency score, and then CQS is his best career score. He had a 96 percentile best quarterback score and a 92 percentile career score. All those numbers are fantastic, and he by far was the best testing quarterback in this draft class from a data perspective, even better than Caleb Williams. So this is an interesting selection for them. It's fun that both Caleb Williams and JJ McCarthy are going to be going head to head in the future. So we're going to see what happens with it. But I am kind of excited to see what the Vikings do with JJ McCarthy because he was an incredibly good testing prospect. Then, of course, we get to pick 17 and Dallas Turner, edge out of Alabama. His data grade is 96.16. His floor is 80.82. His balance grade is 88.49 with a pick AV of 93.82 out of 100. Overall pick grade for this would be a A. Taking a look at his production traits, he had 70 percentile, mid 70 to high 70 percentile solo tackle, sack, and TFL production, which is really good. When you look at his other production, his forced fumble market share was above average, but his pass deflection data wasn't. So pass deflection production wasn't the biggest selling point for him. We get to athleticism traits, 92 percentile explosiveness and 97 percentile speed for his size. He is an incredibly athletic player. And then when you take a look at his adjusted production score, which adjusted production takes a look at age, strength of schedule, strength of team, how productive was he for where he played at. All of these numbers are really good. And he by far was the best edge rusher in this class from a data perspective. He had the most upside, the best athleticism traits, and he has that sort of age area. So Latu, has more development. He's older though. So you're taking a prospect that has more development but is older. Dallas Turner is kind of like a raw bag of goods that could potentially become the best edge rusher in this draft class with development. Very similar to like Daniel Hunter. So I'm not going to compare these two because obviously Hunter was drafted a little bit lower in the draft instead of being picked this high. But that's kind of the thinking or mindset behind this pick is it's not really about where he is right now. It's where he's going to be in the future for the Vikings. Then, of course, we get to pick 108 and Kyrie Jackson, cornerback out of Oregon. His data grade is 59.23 out of 100. His projected floor is 45.06. His balance grade is 52.15. His AV for where he was selected is 64. Overall, this pick would be a F. Taking a look at his production traits, he had a 74 percentile interception score, and with below average solo tackle and below average pass deflection data for him. So not the best production traits overall for him. And then, of course, when you get to athleticism traits, he had above average explosiveness with below average speed for his size. And then when you get to adjusted production traits, not the best in terms of his adjusted production, which looks at his production for his age, his level of competition, and his strength of schedule. All those factors make him probably one of their duds in this particular draft class. He does have good length, but his overall data grade is just not where you want him to be in terms of long-term starting outcomes at the position. But he could surprise. I mean, there's always that chance, but he is definitely in the riskier bucket when it comes to data potential. Then, of course, we get to pick 177 and Walter Rouse, offensive tackle out of Oklahoma. He had a 74.72 data grade, 47.30 floor, balance grade is 61 percentile with a pick AV of 45.17. His overall pick grade would be a C. Taking a look at his athleticism traits, he has elite explosiveness, 92 percentile in fact, but his speed and flexibility score are all below average. Now, he does have good length for the position, so he's one of those players that could get away with not being the fastest or most flexible because of his length and his size, and also because he has a really good explosion trait. But this is a little bit of a suspect. There is that potential that he could bust because of that speed and flexibility. So we'll have to kind of watch and see what happens with him. Then, of course, we get to pick 203 and Will Richard, kicker out of Alabama. The average AV for kickers taken at his round range is 36.79. So the floor would be 36.79 and the balance grade would be 36.79. The pick AV is 16.60. In terms of pick value, taking a kicker here is better value than what's expected from a pick at 203. But I would give the overall pick a F because of how low the data grade is. So the actual impact or value of a kicker at this spot is not where you want it to be. So they might really like him. He might end up becoming a long-term starter, which would all be really good. But most kickers taken here typically only give you 36 percentile AV, which is not what you're really looking for if you're trying to get better, in the NFC North. Then, of course, we get to pick 230 and Michael Jurgens, center out of Wake Forest. Taking a look at his data grade, he had a 58.13 data grade. His floor was 15.83. His balance grade was 36.98 with a pick AV of 15.83. So most prospects here typically average 15.83 in terms of their selection here. His pick grade would be a D though, probably like a high D or F. Taking a look at his athleticism traits, he had near elite explosiveness with above average flexibility and below average speed. So this is a very interesting profile. It's very similar to Walter Rouse to a certain extent, but he has better flexibility. So very explosive, but speed and flexibility is not exactly where you want it to be. So definitely it's more of a risky pick here. And then the last selection for the Minnesota Vikings, probably one of those picks that's like, who is Levi Drake Rodriguez, defensive tackle out of Texas A&M Commerce. His data grade is 77.05. His floor is 25.34 with a balance grade of 51.71. Pick AV is 2.32. Overall pick grade for this would be a C. Taking a look at his production traits, 86 percentile in terms of solo tackle data, 88 percentile in terms of sack data, and 73 percentile in terms of tackle velocity data. The only issue about this production data is that it was at lesser competition. So this wasn't in the FBS. This was not in against a level of competition that was statistically significant. So he was productive, which is a good sign, but it wasn't against really great competition, which makes him more risky. But again, you got him in the 7th round, so the risk is already kind of baked in with a prospect like this. Then, of course, you get to the other production traits, good force fumble data, good interception data, not so hot in terms of pass deflection data. And then athleticism-wise, he does have above average speed, above average flexibility with below average explosiveness for his size. And then adjusted production-wise, average age, MSA rating is a little decent, pass rating is eh. So overall, he's one of those players. He is productive. He does have NFL athleticism traits, but because of where he played in his level of competition, it would be very unlikely if he became a long-term starter for the Vikings. I mean, it is possible, but it is a little bit of a concern because of all the stuff with him. He wasn't like a 99 percentile producer in college. He didn't have 99 percentile athleticism traits, so that inherently makes him a riskier prospect regardless of where he was drafted at. And then, of course, we get to the final grade. I'm going to give them a C. Did they meet all their roster needs? Yes and no. Did they draft good prospects? Yes and no. Did they draft prospects that have the data potential to outperform the draft status of their selection? Yes and no. The top two picks, the most interesting thing about the Vikings is that the top two picks have the potential to become the best prospects at their respective positions. So the best data grade prospect was Dallas Turner in terms of the edge rusher position. The best data grade quarterback was J.J. McCarthy based on his positional data. Every other pick was nowhere near those guys in terms of overall data potential. So that's the issue with this class. That's what I give them a C, is that even if Dallas Turner and J.J. McCarthy both hit, those other selections that could have been better, that could have made this class even better, may not perform as well because of that. So overall, those are my grades for the Minnesota Vikings. Let me know in the comment section below, how do you feel the Minnesota Vikings did in this particular draft class? Do you like the class? Do you hate the class? I want to know. Also, check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/jcoburn to learn more about the data stuff that I do. Also, check out my X, formerly known as Twitter account, at Geometrics. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.